The grocery store was loud with movement and routine noise, a place where no one expected history to pause. Carts rolled, scanners beeped, and people rushed through another ordinary afternoon. Then everything stopped. An elderly black woman stood frozen near the customer service counter, her body slightly bent with age, her dignity quietly intact. In a single shocking moment, power was abused in front of dozens of witnesses, and the sound of slap echoed louder than any alarm ever could. Most people looked away, believing they were watching another moment that would disappear without consequence. What no one realized was that this woman was not powerless, not forgotten, and not who they assumed she was. Within 2 minutes, the balance of control shifted completely, and the very people who believed they ruled that store were about to lose everything. Before the story continues, take a moment to like this video, share with others, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Black Voice Stories for more powerful, true inspired narratives. The woman had entered the store slowly, leaning on a worn cane that had traveled many miles with her. Her coat was old but clean, her shoes carefully polished despite visible cracks in the leather. Time had left its marks on her hands, darkened by years of labor and sacrifice, fingers swollen from arthritis and weather. She carried herself with a quiet grace shaped by decades of endurance. This was not her first time in that store. She had shopped there for years, long before renovations, new management, and a staff that no longer recognized familiar faces. The store itself had changed. Bright corporate branding replaced the neighborhood warmth it once had. Employees were younger, hurried, trained to follow rules without context. Efficiency mattered more than humanity. Surveillance cameras hung from the ceilings like silent judges, watching but rarely protecting. Policies were enforced with rigid certainty, especially toward customers who looked out of place in a world designed to favor speed, wealth, and appearance. The elderly woman moved through the aisles carefully, selecting a few basic items: bread, milk, a small container of soup. Nothing excessive, nothing indulgent. Her movements were slow, but deliberate. She counted her steps, mindful of her balance. Other shoppers passed her without notice, some impatient, some uncomfortable with the reminder of age and fragility. When she reached the checkout area, a minor confusion occurred. A coupon had expired. The system rejected it. The cashier, inexperienced and visibly uncomfortable, hesitated. The woman tried to explain, pointing gently at the printed date, believing it was still valid. Her voice was soft, respectful, shaped by years of being careful not to provoke the wrong reaction in the wrong place. That was when the store manager approached. The manager was known for strict control. Policies were enforced aggressively under belief that authority demanded dominance. Complaints were met with dismissal. Employees feared reprimand more than they valued compassion. The manager had built a reputation for keeping order, but it was order rooted in intimidation rather than leadership. The elderly woman's presence was immediately interpreted as a problem. Her age, her race, her hesitation, all combined into a silent judgment. The manager assumed disrespect where there was none. The situation escalated not because of the coupon, but because of ego and prejudice colliding with vulnerability. The store quieted as attention shifted. Employees froze, unsure whether to intervene. Customers sensed tension but remained passive, conditioned by years of watching injustice without consequence. The woman stood still, confused, embarrassed, and increasingly aware that she was being treated not as a person, but as an inconvenience. The moment happened fast. Too fast for reason to step in. Too fast for courage to rise in the crowd. The slap was sudden, sharp, public. It was not just an act of physical disrespect. It was a declaration of assumed superiority, a message sent through force, reminding the woman of a history she knew all too well. The store fell into stunned silence. The manager stood rigid, believing authority would protect them. What they did not know was that they had just crossed a line drawn long before that store ever existed. The seconds following the slap stretched unnaturally long. The elderly woman did not fall. She did not cry out. She simply adjusted her stance, gripping her cane more firmly, steadying herself not just physically but emotionally. Her expression remained calm, but something deeper had shifted. A lifetime of memories surged forward. Segregated entrances, dismissed complaints, Jobs lost without explanation. Violence excused as authority. Employees avoided eye contact. Some felt shame. Others felt fear. A few felt relief that they were not the target. No one stepped forward. The manager began justifying the action internally, convincing themselves that control had to be maintained. That disorder could not be allowed. That respect must be enforced. It was the same logic used by countless systems throughout history to excuse cruelty. The woman reached into her purse with slow precision. Every movement carried weight. The store watched closely now, uncertain of what would come next. Some expected her to leave in humiliation. Others anticipated tears or anger. What they saw instead was composure. She removed a small, worn card holder and took out a single card. It was simple, professional, unassuming. She examined it briefly, as if confirming something she already knew. The store manager scoffed silently, assuming this was an empty gesture. The power dynamic felt secure. Employees still stood frozen. Customers whispered quietly, debating whether they had truly seen what they thought they saw. The woman approached the customer service desk again, her steps steady despite the tension gripping her body. She placed the card down gently, her hand unwavering. Her presence filled the space in a way that demanded attention without raising a voice. The cashier examined the card, confusion appearing almost immediately. Their expression changed. The color drained from their face. Their hands trembled slightly as they rechecked what they were seeing. Within moments, a call was placed to the regional office. The atmosphere shifted. The manager's confidence began to fracture. Questions formed, but pride prevented them from asking. Authority suddenly felt fragile. The woman waited patiently, leaning slightly on the counter. She did not demand apologies. She did not raise her voice. Her power did not come from volume, but from position, from history, from truth. As minutes passed, whispers grew louder. Phones came out. A few customers began recording discreetly. The manager realized something was wrong. Very wrong. The regional director arrived quickly, faster than anyone expected. Their expression was serious, controlled, and unmistakably concerned. They moved directly toward the elderly woman, not the manager. Respect was shown immediately. Deference. Recognition. The truth emerged quietly but unmistakably. The woman was one of the largest stakeholders in the company, a founding investor. Her family had financed the expansion that allowed this very store to exist. She had remained silent about her identity for years, preferring anonymity, observing how the company treated people when power was unchallenged, and what she had just witnessed was unacceptable. The manager stood frozen as realization struck. Authority evaporated in seconds. The hierarchy reversed instantly. Security footage was reviewed. Witnesses were acknowledged. Policies were referenced, not as shields, but as standards that had been violated. The woman remained calm throughout. Her face carried sadness, not triumph. She had not wanted to reveal herself this way. She had hoped the store would reflect the values it claimed to uphold. Instead, it had exposed the very prejudice it denied. Decisions were made swiftly. The store manager was terminated on the spot. Supervisors who failed to intervene were dismissed. Mandatory investigations were launched. Training programs were suspended pending review. Corporate accountability took precedence over damage control. Employees watched in disbelief as power restructured itself in real time. The elderly woman picked up her items calmly. She paid for them without issue. The coupon was no longer relevant. What mattered now was accountability. The weight of what had occurred settled heavily over the store. Silence returned, but it was no longer empty. It was reflective. The regional director addressed the remaining staff, outlining immediate changes. Policies would no longer be enforced without humanity. Authority would no longer excuse abuse. Zero tolerance would finally mean zero tolerance. The woman listened quietly. Her eyes moved across the room, taking in faces filled with regret, fear, and realization. She saw herself in some of them. Younger versions. People who had learned to stay quiet to survive. She stepped forward once more, her cane tapping softly against the floor. The sound echoed with purpose. Her presence commanded attention, not through intimidation, but through earned respect. The decades she had lived carried stories of injustice that never made headlines, stories of strength that history often ignored. She reminded them, without words spoken aloud, that power should protect the vulnerable, not punish them, that dignity does not expire with age, that silence is often mistaken for weakness. The emotional peak was not in the firings, but in the recognition that racism often hides behind policy, that abuse thrives when witnesses choose comfort over courage, that change requires discomfort. Employees began to understand their role in what had happened. Some cried quietly, others stared at the floor. A few resolved silently to never allow such a moment to pass again without action. The store was closed early that day, not for damage control, but for reckoning. The woman left slowly, her posture unchanged. Outside, the afternoon light felt warmer. She paused briefly, taking a breath heavy with both pain and resolve. This was not victory. It was responsibility. She had exposed a truth that needed to be seen. In the weeks that followed, the incident spread widely, not as gossip, but as a case study in accountability. Policies were rewritten. Leadership was restructured. Training became mandatory and ongoing. Stores across the region were audited. The company issued public acknowledgments and committed to transparent change. More importantly, conversations began. Employees who once felt powerless began speaking up. Customers felt safer intervening. Management learned that authority without empathy was failure. The elderly woman remained mostly anonymous to the public. She did not seek attention. Her goal was never recognition. It was correction. She continued shopping at that store. Slowly, quietly. This time, she was greeted with genuine respect, not because of who she was on paper, but because of what she represented. Her story became a reminder that racism is not always loud. Sometimes it is routine. Sometimes it hides in systems. And sometimes it is exposed by the very people society underestimates. The moral was clear. Never assume weakness. Never confuse silence with surrender. And never forget that accountability can arrive when least expected. Power does not belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who stand firm when it matters most. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you reflect, please like this video, share it with others, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel Black Voice Stories for more powerful, true inspired stories that deserve to be heard.